to Retail Innovation Week. This is the Meet the Storytellers series, and today we are reimagining the customer experience from in-store to in-home and back again. You know, the relationship between brands and consumers is always evolving, and the pace of change over the past year has really accelerated beyond the imagination of even the most ardent futurist. But in an always-on world, consumers are increasingly interacting with brands within their own homes and really everywhere. And today we're seeing this real blurring of where commerce begins and several key shifts within the customer journey. It's a powerful indicator of change in when, and where, and how customers choose to engage with brands at home, online, or in store. So in this panel, we're going to explore how two of the world's largest brands are reimagining the customer experience from in-store to in-home and back again. And I want to introduce my amazing panelists. Today we have Jeannie Weaver, Vice President of Retail Marketing and Special Experiences at AT&T. Jeannie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we have Prexa Graves, Senior Director of Marketing for Starbucks at-home coffee with Nestle USA. Prexa, welcome. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. We are excited to get into this today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Great. And as we get started, I'm going to ask each of you to just tell me a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll go into some questions. We may have one or two questions from the Q&A, and we'll just move through and try to have a lot of fun today. So Jeannie, can you tell me a little bit about your role and your work with AT&T?
I would love to. Thank you. So great to be here today. At AT&T, I have the honor and the responsibility of really programming over 5,200 stores across the nation with true customer imagery, messaging, all of the things that bring a retail location to life and convey the message of our products, our services, and our promise to our consumers. And so now that's on the professional side. I will also tell you, as a whole human, I'm an adoption advocate and a mother of two incredible adopted sons. I'm also a lover of beach walking and also a consumer of red wine.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jeannie. I happen to live in the wine country just outside of LA, so we'll need to talk about that later.
Incredible.
Prexa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Today I work at Nestle USA and I lead our Starbucks at-home CPG marketing team. So a couple of years ago, Nestle and Starbucks got into a global licensing agreement. So all of the Starbucks coffees that you can buy in the grocery store, at Costco, at Walmart, online and Amazon are now sold, distributed, and marketed by Nestle, but of course, bringing that powerful brand of Starbucks to life for all of our consumers. Similarly, I feel like we have to get a glass of wine or something, because I think when I think about personally, I absolutely passionate about wine, about great food. I too am a working mom with two boys who are hopefully paying attention to their remote learning right now. And so juggling all of that like everyone else is today.
That's great, Prexa. And I happen to have a collection of Starbucks cups from all over the world. And now I'm just starting to think that I might occasionally sneak some red wine into them. Who's checking while we're at home, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. So now let's talk a little bit about the consumer story. You've heard our stories. Let's talk a little bit about the consumer story, because that's really one of the focuses of what we can, what we hope to talk about today. I'd love to really understand what both of you think that brands need to know about today's consumer story. Jeannie, for example, can you maybe talk to me or tell me a little bit about, does retail still have a role in this consumer narrative?
Oh, that is a question that comes up so often. And I think what's interesting is when people think about retail and a shift to online, probably previous to 2020, there was some thinking of maybe you don't need as many retail locations, or does retail play such an important role? And I think 2020 actually told us that retail is not only has been important in the past, it's extremely important today and will continue to be important in the future. when you think about a consumer's journey, all the research is going to tell you they are looking online, they are, typing in all the information they need to really make an informed decision. But here's the key. There is this moment of confidence that they want around their purchase. And so when they come into your physical retail location, you absolutely are showing them the seller can transfer confidence around the purchase. So that's really key and important. In addition to that, think about where we're at right now in this time. We're mostly in our homes, right? Or going only to essential places. And when you've got a physical retail location that has evolved, that can truly meet this new customer need, this moment of world pandemic, that is critically important. You can start to deliver services like curbside pickup or delivering something right to your door. So physical retail, still very important. Emotionally, it's important to give confidence to the consumer, but there is that challenge to us. We cannot stand in the physical moment of where it was today. We've got to evolve and add services that really unlock this experience in this moment in time for consumers.
I really love that. The idea about the emotion of shopping and the emotion of being a consumer. Maybe Prexa, can you help me understand, some of those emotions, how that experience at home can connect to the experience in store, particularly for a brand like Starbucks?
Honestly, this is a complex question for Starbucks because the brand comes to life in a lot of different ways for consumers. Think about, there are 15,000 or so cafes across the country, whether they're owned or licensed. You can find Starbucks at grocery stores. You can find Starbucks at hotels like Marriott. You can also drink it on an Alaska Airlines flight or a Delta Airlines flight if you're flying these days. So the ways and the places in which consumers are interacting with the brand are multifaceted, right? And when I think about in-store, there's of course that established connection and relationship that the brand has created with consumers in the four walls of its cafes, right? While that's different for everyone, it's meaningful. It is about connectivity. It's about a relationship, whether it's with the environment of the store or where it sits on the street or who the barista is or the other patrons that you might interact with on a regular basis. And that means something to you and it means something to consumers. In the CPG space, the challenge is, well, how do you bring some of that experience to life, right? I mean, you're on borrowed property, if you will. You're kind of renting space or leasing space on the shelf from retailers. And you're competing with hundreds of other brands in some cases, right? Like in a Starbucks cafe, there's one brand there. And once you've walked through the doors of that cafe, you're all in. And now it's really just, what are you going to choose? And how, as a brand, you try to get a higher ticket out of that consumer. When somebody walks down the grocery aisle, now they're overwhelmed with hundreds of choices. So how does the brand stand out? How does it kind of go beyond just the packaging? What is it about that brand? What's the essence and what's that kind of impact that it has? And how do you bring that to life, right? So I guess one of the challenges, but also one of the passion points for me and my team is really unlocking that essence of Starbucks, like what makes it so special to consumers when they're ordering their favorite drink. How do you channel that and cultivate it and amplify it when somebody's walking down the aisle of a grocery store, and how do you sort of jump out at them? And it's not just through your product and your packaging, but it's about that connection, right? So what are you going to use to create that connection with them out of the store that's going to draw them into the store and want to pick up your product and bring it home with them?
As you're talking about this emotional connection to the brand, Prexa, I am thinking about Starbucks and I've got something in my nose that's triggering in my brain and I am feeling myself hold that warm cup of coffee. Like I am there with your brand. You guys have done a great job.
Thank you. And that's been the focus of really our at-home business for these last, dozen years or so, is channeling the magic and uplift of the cafe in home. What is it about it? Is it about connectivity? Is it about sensory? Is it about that warm feeling? Is it some sort of emotional connection? Is it a functional, like get up and go? But you know what it is when you walk through the cafe. So how do you channel that? at home, right? How do you help people create those great experiences through the product? And then how do they remember that when they go to the grocery store and they pick you as their brand of choice? That's our business challenge, but it's a really great one to tackle.
And it's extraordinary when you think about it. It's this whole idea. I mean, often we think about emotion as being kind of in the fluffy, soft sets, right? But we also know that emotion is everything that leads towards actual motion and actual activity by consumers. It's making me wonder, kind of how have consumers' expectations from your brands changed? And what does that evolution look like? Jeannie, maybe if you could start us off by talking a bit about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think what happened as the world changed for us is it became really clear that telecommunications, mobile service were essential. And so as people are in a new way of life, what they know is that now those that maybe they would drive to see or something they would go do, they've actually got to do that interaction now in a mobilely connected world from their home. But the mobile phone was the thing that was connecting them to so much that they loved and that they were missing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was a paradigm shift for sure. Where I'll tell you I'm really proud about the action that we took is because the world changed in this moment. We had days, I mean, truly days. When does a large corporation move in the period of days? Not normally, but we did to really meet a new shopping need that consumers had, and that was around curbside service. Now, it continues to evolve, but when you talk about in 24 to 48 hours, we had locations across the nation that no, you couldn't go in the door. They were closed that way, but you could absolutely conduct business for something that was so essential now and so critical to connecting with your loved ones in the day-to-day life that you needed to maintain as much as possible. So yeah, I think there was a paradigm shift around who we were, what we could offer to them, and we met the need of really connecting with them where it was safe and we could be there of support for them.
I love that. And it is remarkable that brands can shift it with that amount of flexibility in such a short period of time. Prex, I'd love to hear how Starbucks really anticipated and responded to some of those consumer changes and expectations too.
I think similar to what Jeannie's describing, obviously we all as consumers ourselves went through this massive shift at one time, right? What we saw with our coffee consumers is there was this real retrenching, if you will, of as your out-of-home habits changed because your workplace environment situation may have changed, you're not traveling as much, you may not be stopping by your favorite cafe to grab a drink because your cafe is not open right now. What you were looking for when you were trying to create those experiences at home were brands that you could trust, brands that you knew you could rely on for quality and consistency, and that had some sort of a special meaning to you. So our at-home CPG business has honestly benefited like one could never imagine, really. And I guess a lot of, home usage products, food and beverage categories have really seen the benefit in COVID. But what we really had to do was rise to that challenge, right? Like you've got millions of people who can't maybe go to their favorite cafe anymore. They can't get their favorite cup of Pike Place roast or their vanilla latte. So what are they going to do about it? And, what we had to do, it was a few steps, right? I think basics, business fundamentals, make sure you have supply. I mean, we had a tremendous strain on our supply chain to really meet the demand of, remember those early days of pantry loading? It wasn't just toilet paper, it was also coffee, right? It was also those basics, those everyday necessities that were going to help you function at home. You've got more people in the household drinking coffee now because you might have yourself, your partner, maybe some adult children at home too. And so all of these things we had to really factor in, of course, to our business model, make sure we could keep up with supply chain. But then on top of that, we also found that some parts of our plan that we had hoped to execute last year had to pivot. We had to lean in more on, say, our core products. And some of our innovation didn't have as much relevancy anymore, but then others really spiked. So things that were really closely connected with recreating a cafe experience at home were going through the roof. People wanted more of that and we almost couldn't keep up. the things that maybe were a little more complicated, a little harder to understand, just didn't resonate at this time, because what consumers were really looking for was a value add to their life, right? And something that they could easily incorporate. So these were some of those shifts and pivots that we had to make. And I think as well, just kind of trying to understand what consumers might be looking for, whether it was content, whether it was recipes, whether it was just some empathy and understanding, like, hey, they get us. They know what I've hardly ever made coffee at home because I'm always grabbing it on the go. So actually I need to understand how to do this. So let's put out some videos. Let's show you the best way to create the perfect cup. And these are just all the different types of things that we've been unlocking last year, just to really meet that consumer where he or she is.
I love that. And I think, where both of you are really talking about is how, what really successful companies actually manage to satisfy a need for consumers, possibly even a need that those consumers didn't even realize that they had. But it enables those consumers to really move forwards in their lives, and more directly and more easily. The more easily those needs can be fulfilled, the more valuable the company can be actually to customers. And I think both of your brands have shown, like a real necessity for customers over time. But maybe you can help to share with me some of the ways that those new customer experiences have moved forward. What kind of new customer experiences are you thinking about, and are you thinking about in the future?
I think there's a couple things that I would want to say. First of all, I love the conversation that Prexa you were just having. So before we talk sort of about future, I wanted to comment on that, because we definitely needed to tap into what were the pain points of consumers in this very unprecedented time. And one of the things that we did at AT&T is we noted people were losing their jobs, their income was not as stable. And so we really took a stand to pause disconnecting anyone for non-payment for quite a time period, to help people catch up, get their footing, understand sort of how they might reimagine their budgets at home, things of that nature. So, we did a lot around shopping and meeting them where they were and what they needed. But in addition to that, we were truly there in supporting our customers in a time where most people, most companies, you're not a not-for-profit organization, but we really paused on taking those payments or taking any action if the payments weren't coming in, to truly support them and be there. So thank you for that, Prexa, because that prompted me with that. And I just think we're talking a lot about retail and how we connect with consumers and how we flex, but it's always so important to remember that the people make up the business. And so when you've got loyal consumers and you really want to support them, it's really important to make sure that we're looking holistically at the relationship. And so we're doing things even beyond your brick and mortar that will support and make sense for them. So I wanted to add that. But yeah, let's totally talk future. I'm all about it. We've got some really fun things coming up. I often, though, like to step back. So we're going to talk about, like, what do we think is next? I think it's always important to pave what has been transpiring, where have we been? And I'm not going to go, 20 years back. I'm just going to go a couple of years. I think one of the things that we know from consumers, especially those that have tremendous buying power right now, so I'm talking about millennials, they crave experiences over things, which isn't this interesting in the time that we're in. But we actually were working a lot. So another part of my role is special experiences. So how do we immerse people into whether it is intellectual property or technology that brings them something really cool, really unique, and really special. And so we were, we had experiences, especially within our flagship locations across the United States. So people could really touch, feel, and love and experience certain things. That was great. It built a ton of brand love. We've got all the data to show that that really made a difference. But here was our Achilles heel. The thing that we needed to do is we only had a few people experiencing these things. And we were lacking truly the scalability to make sure that it was experienced by few, but viewed and understood by many. So at that point, a couple of years ago, great experiential items. And what we started to learn was how social and digital could really come into play. Now, fast forward, 2020. Honey, everything is digital and social because we're not doing anything physical, right? It's not happening. So what's been incredible is that now we have been flexing our muscles around scalability, experiences, things that really are touching now millions of people, not just hundreds or thousands of people. And so when I think about 2021, I think we're probably going to be in a hybrid somewhere. Don't believe we're going to be doing much physical until maybe mid next year, but we've learned a lot. And I think there's going to be some great flex to be able to put that together. My prediction, however, for 2022 is this: get ready. People are going to be running out the doors. They want experiences. They want to touch it, feel it, love it. And we're going to be able to deliver that. But by the way, in these moments of sort of, strife or challenge, we've learned so much. And so now we're going to take all that we know about physical experiences and what that does to build a brand inside of retail, by the way, adjacent to retail that then can drive into retail, right? They have great function that way. But we're also going to apply that scalability. So watch out 2022. Here we come. It's going to be great. We're really going to be able to offer that to consumers, both in flagship and brand, but also smaller experiences in your neighborhood AT&T store. That's going to be something to watch out for.
I love that, Jeannie. I mean, so much of what you're talking about is about this new kind of reimagined, re-energized sort of omni-channel experience. And when I think about that, and particularly when I think about it as it relates to the CPG category, Prexa, how do the insights that you gain about your consumer, how do they really play a role in creating and delivering those seamless omni-channel experiences? And does tech play a role in those experiences as well?
Right now, I think the buzzword in CPG, and of course lots of other categories, is omni. And I'm not even sure half the time if people are using it the right way. But honestly, it's really that full circle, right? So whether it's, when we, I guess for brand Starbucks, when we think about omni, we zoom out a little bit because the brand, like I was mentioning earlier, really lives in a few different places in people's lives, right? So what we need to be able to do is thread that for everyone, right? So whether it's the corner cafe, which isn't part of the CPG business, but it's where people experience the brand, to an out-of-home or workplace environment, to in-home. It's really what is the essence of the brand? How do you make sure it's coming to life in a really consistent fashion? And then for those consumers that I speak to more specifically, which is the at-home consumer and the CPG consumer, absolutely understanding their journey and how it may or may not be changing is critically important, right? I mean, Jean, you articulated it really well, but so much has changed this year in consumer shopping patterns. And, while some, I think about the early days of COVID when grocery stores were limiting entrance, and so store traffic patterns were really diminished. There was one-way aisles. And so you think about where a shopper might have spent a full hour in the grocery store kind of perusing as they see fit. Now it's like, I want to get in, get out, limit my exposure, and just get home back to where I know it's safe and comfortable. And so if that's the case, and they're really not focusing that much on what's around them, what are the other ways that you can kind of spark to them, right? So digital and social is absolutely an important tool in our toolbox in terms of reaching our consumers. In addition, I think we put a lot of energy into our website this last year. We don't have a direct-to-consumer sales model, but we definitely want to make sure we are driving consumers to where they can find our products, where they're available, that they can purchase either brick and mortar inline. So a lot of the tools and investment that we've done, whether it's capabilities or SEO or SEM, has really been to try to drive that awareness and understanding and just be helpful, I think, to our consumers in a time when they were just confused about where to go and where to find things, as well as then like what to do with the things once they had them. So it was that content piece as well.
I've got a great question here in the chat that seems to just link together some of the things that both of you are talking about in this customer experience. But the question is, do you find that customers are going away from being impulse shopping and shopping perhaps more in a more intentional manner? And how are you responding to that?
I'll jump in on this one first. I mean, I think it's a bit mixed. I think, you know, what we've seen, at least in grocery, there is a kind of a tried and true component to how people are shopping, especially earlier on last year when the pandemic first hit. There wasn't as much experimentation. I think people were gravitating to what they knew because they were looking honestly for something that they could trust. So if you can anchor to that, and if your brand already has that established reputation, it was definitely going to benefit, and brands like Starbucks certainly did, right? But I think there has been experimentation in different ways. I mean, look at some of those trends that have emerged over this last year. One of the trends that I think has been building for a few years now that we've always tried to link to is this notion of amateur professionalism. I think that came to life really significantly last year when you think about, how many people tried to make a sourdough starter and be like a baker, right? And on the coffee side of things, there was a Dalgona whipped coffee trend that everyone thought they were a barista all of a sudden. So there's a little bit of that too, and that does inspire some new habits and some new purchases. So if you can participate in that, be part of that conversation, offer a perspective or some value to that, I think you can really get in with consumers early and really make an impact on their purchase decision.
Thank you. That's really great. Jeannie, are your shoppers more mission driven or more impulse driven? And have you found at all that they've been more intentional over the last year?
I've got an answer for you, but first, Prexa, I agree. At home, we're learning all these new skills, or we're like flexing our muscles. I totally believed I was a moss wall creator, which is now what you see. This is my quarantine creation in the back. So I'm with you. We are flexing out for sure. I would tell you from an AT&T consumer perspective, I align with a lot of what Prexa talked about in terms of consumers in this moment. There wasn't a ton of experimentation. It is, they want to be with a brand that they trust, that they know will support them. And I want to go back to AT&T's service being essential for people, being essential to connect, being essential to do what is left of kind of normal day-to-day business. And so, their wireless service as an example, the entertainment that they're consuming a lot more of, by the way, in television and streaming and those kind of areas, those are things that we provided to them. In addition to that, think about this, at-home environment we're all living in. So here we are on a Zoom call. I've got 2 kids doing online school just a little ways away. My husband also is working right now, and we are all connected to the internet. So you've got to have a broadband or fiber service that is also delivering and is secure, at top-notch speeds to make sure there is no wheel of death that is happening on anyone's video call, right? So we saw consumers actually take a pause back from deal shopping and jumping to new carriers and really kind of say, I want to be with someone that we trust. And here was the incredible thing for us at AT&T. Not only did we maintain the customer base that we had, but we saw those that were with competitors start to come to AT&T. And it's because we were a brand that they could trust. They knew that our network was going to be there for them, whether that is a wireless network, a broadband or fiber network, or truly something that was fueling their entertainment. So that's what we saw. It was people sticking with us, but then also customers coming to us because they knew. And by the way, we have screaming deals. but it was more about really sticking with a company and a brand that they knew could deliver such an essential service or services to them. So that's what we experienced.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I could take everything you just said and substitute AT&T with Starbucks, and that's exactly what we experienced. And I think it's for those same reasons. I mean, we saw millions of new households enter our brand this year, and the coffee category in general, just because of all those behavior changes. But yeah, I mean, it was, not only increased consumption from those that were already loyal to the brand, and now they just wanted to experience more and try different things, but also new households, new consumers that said, I know this is a brand that I can trust because I know what they stand for. They're high quality. They have everything I need. They have a built up reputation that I believe in and I understand, and they're the brand I'm going to go with. And that's so impactful and so powerful.
We were already in our household such a fan of the Starbucks brand, but we've expanded Prexa because my 11-year-old now is flexing into decaf Starbucks coffee. So
oh, wow.
Just know, we're going early on this thing.
That's amazing. Early adopter.
Right.
That's it. Another great question coming in from the Q&A is, what do each of you see as some of the biggest new challenges facing brands, as we kind of emerge into this new normal?
One of the things that I think is really important is when you think about physical versus digital and online. And when I think about those two things discreetly, physical has always been about this presence, this personalization, this experience, this moment that's going to matter to consumers. And then again, like if I shut that off and I switch and go, well, what does, digital or social, actually, let's just stick with digital. What does digital mean? Digital has always been viewed for the most part as this is super efficient. It's seamless. It's fast. And I think the challenge for brands right now are understand how these things truly intersect and now need to work in concert together. And I think you've got to take digital and you better wrap that baby up in humanity. And you also need to take your physical and make sure you're evolving it so it is seamless, frictionless, quick, and efficient. Because, Prexa said it when she talked about the grocery stores. Once upon a time, I used to peruse that aisle for a long time. Guess what? I want in, I want out, quick, 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 right? So I think there's this beautiful sort of intersection where we as a brand need to chart the customer journey in today's world. And we've got to pick up the best practices from each of those unique channels and apply them cross-functionally where they exist. And you can't be resistant to change. We cannot do things the way that we used to. And that's great. And that's okay. But that's what we need to do.
I totally agree. I mean, the customer journey has been disrupted like in no other time, at least that I can think of. And when I think about traditional grocery, there are a lot of things that happened last year that are continuing into this year that are actually going to stick. Yeah. I mean, so many more people are shopping online for groceries. And certainly that's the category that's been growing pretty significantly year over year, but nothing like what we saw in this past year. And now that consumers understand how easy and convenient it is, some people are never going back. I mean, I've got so many friends and colleagues that say, well, why would I need to go to a grocery store? It's so easy. It's just a click of a button. I already like what I bought last time. I can just add it back in. And so if that's the world that we're operating in, it's important to step up to that, right? So are you as equipped in that new space as you were in the old space? And I think when I think about a traditional CPG environment, there are so many sort of commonalities and fundamentals of like, get your assortment right, make sure you've got good shelf placement, work with your retail partners on, how you can have prominence on shelf and be at the right eye level. And there's so many different factors of orchestrating your presence in a brick and mortar retail. Well, what does that mean for online? And I think brands need to figure that out because the shopping journey could be similar or it could be completely different. And I think what you have to understand through insights is how do people shop in store? How does that change, if at all, online? Is it different, right? Are they shopping by brand or are they shopping in a more functional sense by format? Are they shopping by need state or occasion or day part? And if so, is that how you should orchestrate your digital shelf or your digital aisle? And could that be completely different than how the grocery store might look? And I think digging into that and understanding that, I think you can capture a lot of value, right? And it's really understanding who that consumer is and how they want to shop and what they're looking for. And that's just today's consumer. If I think about Gen Z and the impact that they're having, I mean, they are a digital first, mobile first generation. So I don't even think we all know yet how they like to shop. I think they're still figuring that out. It is primarily mobile. It is at the click. So are we innovating and adapting and adjusting for that consumer in mind too, right? The emerging consumer. And what does that really mean? And are we agile enough to flex where we have to, depending on the environment that the consumer wants to operate in, yet still have some sort of consistency to give it that true omni perspective, right? Because whether you're shopping in a Safeway or a Target, or whether you're shopping online or through a pure play or a third party, what's the essence of what you're going to make sure you're consistent about, but then what are you going to flex to based on what's important for that environment or what your shopper in that environment needs?
I think that's so great, because really, when I'm hearing both of you talking, it's as if you're putting data into a completely different context, right? And really looking at data quite holistically in order to gain a sense of greater understanding and flexibility and adaptability for your customers as well. Maybe Jeannie, if you could talk a little bit about, the role that data plays for AT&T in terms of understanding and adapting to your customers.
We often talk about being data driven, and we are data driven. I always like to caution one smidge, though, when it comes to the word data, because data should be informing you all along the way. But what we have to remember and recall is that data is truly the customer voice. It's really that simple. And so there are people that can get analysis paralysis because I've got so much data. What do I do with it? And I think you have to really be able to cut through, not just with, again, data being what the customer is telling you. You've got to cut through what the customer is saying and how that informs what you go do. I think people use data two ways. My personal opinion is one is the right way, one is not so much the right way. So the first way is people, people in positions like mine or Prexa's might sit with our teams and we say, this is our strategy, these are our tactics, here we go. And then we go find all of the data that supports our strategy and our tactics, right? Now that's, spoiler alert, the way that I don't think you should be using data. Because remember, data is the voice of the customer, truly. The other way, which is the way that I believe we should be leaning into this, is we should truly listen to the voice of the customer, truly understand what they're saying, the context they're saying it in, and listen, really listen. From there, you develop your strategy and your tactics. You'll never lose if you approach it that way, because we are in the business to service and connect customers. We can't do that if we've got dreams in a silo or in my own little world that I want to apply to everyone. No, I've got to let the customer guide me. So that's often how I think about data, how we leverage data at AT&T. It is customer-centric, customer voice-centric. That is the way that we then develop strategies and tactics.
I love hearing that, because I think, I think of data in two ways, and I think it's somewhat similar to what you just mentioned, Jeannie. I think of data more, I guess, in the insights space first, and that's what I totally agree informs strategy, right? So how deeply can you understand and learn about your consumer, about your competitors, about the environment, about trends, whether they're macro or micro trends, and how do you use that to inform, of course, your future strategy? And then I think of data in a different way, which is then, okay, now that I know what my consumer wants, how do I then go find them out in the ether and target them and get them the right message at the right time, in the right medium, in a way and a time and when they're most receptive, right? So I kind of look at it in that two-pulsed One is sort of that insight stream that you constantly have to digest and understand and evolve your strategy with. And then there's that more practical first and third party data. How am I going to find you, Jeannie, and make sure that I know that you go and order, a caramel macchiato? Well, I want to target you with an ad for a caramel flavored ground coffee that I think you might love to enjoy at home. And will that resonate? And if not, okay, well, let me learn from that and try something different with you. And if you respond, then how can I adapt that learning to, my next interaction with you?
I'd love to hear what you'd recommend for a flat white. That's my jam right there.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk after this. I definitely have some tips.
One of the things I'm hearing from you both is this idea of having that greater and deeper understanding of consumers and really knowing them from a quite human point of view. So there's a question that's just come in from the chat about empathy. And it says here, there's a lot of conversation about empathy for brands. How have your brands worked to make the customer experience more empathetic and more human?
When I think of empathy, I think it starts with listening. Listen first to understand rather than jumping to conclusions. That's probably a phrase that we use a lot. I think I use that with my children quite a bit as well. But yeah, I think it's really just having your ears open and really listening. And listening, I think, is both, listening in the most literal sense, but also observing, interpreting, internalizing, and then knowing what to do with that, right? So when I think about last year when it felt like the world was falling apart, our consumers, and like all of us, were sort of at a loss of what they were supposed to do. And these, we're very habitualistic people. Creatures, I guess, people are. And when your routines are disrupted, you feel very uncomfortable. It creates a lot of anxiety. And, this is of course true in many aspects of our life, but some of those comforts and those things that you look forward to every day that are part of your routine, whether it's, I'm going to drop my kids off at school and then I'm going to swing through the drive-through at Starbucks and grab my drink. And then I'm going to do these things in the office and maybe I'll go grab a cup of coffee with someone at 10:30. And it's just sort of part of your day and part of your routine. And when all that gets thrown out the window, you're kind of at a loss. And so consumers, what we found was they wanted help. They were kind of wanting us to reach out to them. And part of it was like offer them solutions, of course, and tips and ideas, but it was also just to be sympathetic and empathetic with what they were going through and not, in some ways try to be too salesy with them, but just try to express that, hey, we get it. We're going through it too. And, we're not going to hit you over the head with things. We're going to listen. And when the time is right, when you're receptive and when you're ready for it, we have something for you, and sort of think about it that way.
Really moving away from this whole idea of like a brand-driven monologue where sometimes, brands can be in that place where their voice is so powerful that it's just kind of yelling and selling. Whereas this is more of a paradigm, if I'm hearing you right, the paradigm is more like a dialogue rather than a monologue. Really.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think your brand is really only what people say it is and believe it is. And if, they see you as a certain type of personality and then all of a sudden, they're not ready for that, they're not receptive to that, and you're still sort of going at it, I think it can be really offensive, right? So it was really important for us to really understand where people were. And it was a similar place that we were. So we said, okay, we get it. We know what they need. We're going to offer it to them. And when they're ready for more, we'll have more.
Jeannie, maybe you can help us understand a little bit about how your brand has worked to make the customer experience more empathetic and more human.
One of the things that was sparked for me, Prexa, as you were talking, is brands need to be relatable in this moment, right? So you can't stand from the mountaintops and shout and just shout at people. Again, going back to how we approached this situation at AT&T, we wanted to support people. We knew we were an essential service. We wanted them to know we were there for them, and we absolutely wanted to be relatable. And it's making me think about our commercials. So with our commercials, from 2013 to about 2017, we had a service rep kind of at your neighborhood store named Lily in those ads. There was about 40 ads, and was truly a very successful, relatable campaign for us. And in this moment of COVID, where people need their essential service of AT&T to be relatable to them, we brought Lily back. And it has been incredible to have someone so relatable on the big screen and in digital with our consumers, talking about what AT&T can continue to provide and help them with. It's really been very, very successful for us. And here's why it works. Because when you go to any neighborhood AT&T store, there is a Lily in that store for you. And so whether Lily is helping you curbside, or she's coming to your door for our ready to go service or right to you service, she's there, and she is a representation of what our brand is for consumers, which is someone who has a great kind of wit, but is also empathetic, but most importantly relatable to what we are all in fact going through. So yeah, that's when I think about where we're at right now in this time, I think Lily is such a great representation of that.
And thinking about this conversation about empathy, one of the other questions that's just come up in the chat is about personalization, really personalization and actually localization. Obviously, right now, things are very different from community to community and place to place. Let's talk a little bit about that. And how do you guys see personalization and or localization evolving over the next year?
One of the greatest things that you can do in your organization to ensure you can deliver personalization and localization is really twofold. One is going back to that physical and digital world that we've talked about, really wrapping digital into kind of this humanity. There's so much to learn, and you can serve up things that are very targeted, very local, very personalized to consumers. So that's kind of job one. The other thing is, how are you organized as a team, as a company? And I'm proud to say that we have leaders all across the nation, and I would consider us a field, and now I'm going to replace field for a second, consumer-led organization. We have people across the nation in all the pockets saying, this is what my consumer is saying, needs, and we, in a headquarters position, help deliver that, help unlock that. So I think it's those two things. I think it's really getting that physical and digital, wrapped in the humanity and being personalized and targeted. But you've got to have your ear to the ground. And again, going back to that data, right? Like, don't attach the things that you want to hear. Really hear it and then act upon the behalf of the customer. That's how I think you win with localization and personalization, is just being ear to the ground and getting it done on behalf of your consumers.
I agree. I think, in our business, it's slightly different in some ways in that we typically have a national assortment and national offering. So for us, localization often means, I guess you could call it more retailer specific customization. And so there's that other level of when you work through a retailer to then sell to your end consumer, you've got to also understand what's important to that retailer. Are there geographical differences between, or just, psychographic differences from a shopper standpoint between a Walmart shopper and a Target shopper and Costco or Kroger or Safeway? And if so, is there something that we can do as a brand? I wouldn't say it's then localized, but I guess it's more customized by retailer to really cater to that retailer shopper. So that's one way in which we try to infuse that into our executional priorities. I think from a marketing standpoint, we've definitely been experimenting in personalization as well, leveraging as much data as we can get our hands on, both first party and third party. And then, a fun part of our marketing mix is really to try to find our consumers out there and target them and test and learn and do A/B testing and test different creative and different messages and different offers, and try to then understand and run studies behind the scenes. Can we generate sales lift out of a particular execution or not? Can we create more response? Is there more engagement? Is something really resonating? And if so, is that something that we should do what should we do about that? How do we bring that into our strategy and our mix? And so those are a couple of different ways in which we think about not quite localization, but sort of, and personalization too.
Love it. And as we're coming up to the end of our time, I've got two more questions for you. One from the chat. I'd love to know, Nina is asking us, what is your advice to brands who will need to create experiences that are memorable, engaging, and will ultimately drive sales in the coming year?
Hi, Nina. I'd love to jump on that for you. So I really think it's a pretty straightforward formula. First, be simple, be straightforward, and be authentic. And authentic is a big word. It has a ton of meaning. You need to stay true to your brand values and also true to the audience in which you're interacting, but really simple, straightforward, and authentic. And I think of Maya Angelou on this one. So, and what she said very, very, very profoundly is people may not remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And so when we think through that emotional connection, keep that top of mind for what you're out there doing on behalf of your brand.
I love that. I'm so in alignment with what you just said, Jeannie. One of our Starbucks tenets, if you will, or sort of part of our core brand essence is to uplift the everyday. And that's something that we want to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable to. So wherever you're experiencing the brand in whatever way, shape, or form, how do we make sure we are sticking to our values? I think that's so important. Nina, my advice would be to meet consumers where they are today. So really understand, it kind of goes back to that, everything we've talked about already, empathy and listening. What do they want from you as a brand today? And then, but at the same time, I think you need to know them well enough to know where they're going and meet them there at the end and welcome them with open arms and give them what they need when they're ready to get there, right? So it's sort of like, I think sometimes it's easy to meet them where they are, but can you also meet them where they're going? So can you be agile? Can you listen? Can you kind of anticipate? And can you be ready to act and be ready to service them with what they need when they're ready?
Wow, powerful stuff. We're down to our last question. And so I'd really like to know kind of what is the one thing, knowing what we know today, what is the one thing that each of you want people to remember as they're on their own path to reimagining the customer experience for their own brands?
This has really resonated with me across what Jeannie said as well, as consumers really want to engage with brands that they feel understand them and are listening to them. So I think if you have cultivated that relationship with your consumers, don't take it for granted. Nurture it, keep listening, and keep evolving as your consumer does. And I think your brand will only be stronger in the future.
That's awesome. I would just add on that you have one secret weapon. That's right. All of you have one secret weapon. What it is that you are a consumer too. Use that to your advantage.
I love it. Thank you so much, ladies. Once again, our panelists were Jeannie Weaver, Vice President of Retail Marketing and Special Experiences at AT&T, and Prexa Graves, Senior Director of Marketing for Starbucks at-home coffee with Nestle USA. I'm Alissa Allen of the Integer Group, and thank you for joining us at Retail Innovation Week.